Welcome back to the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson, back for some more point, counterpoint, and it is our 100th episode. Unfortunately, we're missing the blinking 100 graphic, so just imagine that on the screen. Today, we're going to be talking about nitrogen in the 3-year-old female division. She feels pretty and her prospects in the Breeders' Cup, and as always, what else caught our eye from the weekend. Let's jump right in, though, and talk about Nitrogen, who won the Grade 1 Alabama over the weekend, beating Kentucky Oaks winner Good Cheer. Let's see, James, I'll start with you. Has Nitrogen essentially done enough already to earn 3-year-old filly championship honors?
Well, I do. I think she's the front runner right now because of recency, having won that Grade 1 on Saturday in Alabama. I thought, impressive win. Her stablemate, Lacara, who's the only multiple Grade 1 winner in the division, gave way readily on the far turn and finished out of the top 3. And Good Cheer tried to reel her in, put forth a good run, but Nitrogen just turned for home full of run and had plenty in reserve to hold off her challenger. So with six stakes wins this year, including 5 on turf, her body of work based upon this Alabama performance, I believe, puts her to the fore of the division. But this division is still completely wide open because there's other runners out there that are going to have a chance. And I'll start naming with Scottish Lassie. Now, granted, she hasn't been beaten. She didn't beat the competition that Nitrogen faced on Saturday, but she's only running 2 graded stakes this year. She started with the 3rd in the Grade 1 Acorn, and then she won the Coaching Club American Oaks. She's aiming for the Grade 1 Cotillion, a victory there. That's really, you get a victory there from Scottish Lassie, or, you could have a filly like Good Cheer potentially come back and win a race like the Spinster this fall. It's going to all come down to me, the Breeders' Cup distaff. We'll see what happened in Saturday's personal ensign. Torpedo Anna's in there against Leslie's Rose, Raging Seas, and some others. But I'm not ready to say that the 3-year-old fillies are out of the mix for the distaff by any means. I think both divisions are sort of unsettled heading into the fall, the older filly dirt division and the 3-year-old filly dirt division. And while Nitrogen's a slim leader right now, she's got to keep winning to secure her spot at the top.
Vance, what is your counterpoint to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Nitrogen's record, I mean, the only loss this year was by a nose in the Belmont Oaks. Otherwise, I mean, she's just been flawless, not only on the grass, but now on the dirt twice. The Wonder again in the slot by a huge margin. Now the Alabama against what many people already considered perhaps a slight leader in Good Cheer. So, yeah, I mean, with this kind of record, the other 3-year-old fillies that James mentioned, they'll be pointing for the Cotillion next month. Nitrogen will not be running there. But they will have to beat her eventually at some point, and it would have to be the Breeders' Cup distaff. And I think anybody that emerges out of the Cotillion would probably have to win the Breeders' Cup outright to snatch the championship away from Nitrogen. And to me, honestly, just looking at Nitrogen and looking at the rest of them, I just don't see them quite being good enough to topple her or outfinish her at Del Mar. James mentioned Scottish Lassie. Yeah, she's on the improve, but she only beat a few horses in the Coaching Club American Oaks with an easy trip. The Cotillion, like I said, she's not going to be facing the likes of Nitrogen or Good. I don't know. I don't think Good Cheer is going to show up in the Cotillion either. I think a mile and a 16th is just too short for her. So, even if Scottish Lassie were to win the Cotillion, she has 2 quote Grade 1 wins. She wouldn't have been beating, major Grade 1 company going into the Breeders' Cup like Nitrogen has. So to me, I think Nitrogen, a lot of things are going to have to go wrong for Nitrogen for her to lose the 3-year-old filly title from here. We'll see what happens in her final prep. I think Mark Cassie has talked about the Seneca Stakes at Churchill Downs, which would be a soft spot. I think the Spinster Stakes is open up for her too. I think that's a winnable spot as well. So for me, Nitrogen is the clear-cut leader so far, and I think it's going to be hard to depose her right now.
But I will say, first off, Nitrogen had an extremely favorable trip, just like Scottish Lassie. I mean, when Lecard didn't make it to the end of the far turn before she was going backwards, and that just left her loose on a clear lead. So, I mean, that wasn't a true dynamics of a race like she'd face in the Breeders' Cup Distaff by any stretch. Secondly, losing that Belmont Oaks, she's running 2 Grade 1s this year. She's 1 for 2 in them. So she has to keep winning also. If she was to lose some races moving forward, like per se, not win a Grade 1 moving forward, she could be at the subject of she's going to be like, they're going to be like sitting back needing all the 3-year-old fillies to keep losing. And fillies like Scottish Lassie to get upset in the cotillion. She doesn't have it safe right now if she doesn't win some races the rest of the way.
Well, James has known me long enough to know that I don't necessarily lean so much on grades, especially quote Grade 1 races, because Grade 1 races are not necessarily consistent in their depth. As I mentioned earlier, the Coaching Club American Oaks wound up with just 4 horses. I mean, to me, that just was not a Grade 1 quality field. Yes, that's what's going to show up on the catalog page, but you got to look at each race individually, grade 1 or not. And to me, Nitrogen, based on her consistency, the number of actual stakes wins that she has, her versatility, I think that gives her the edge right now.
She is 6 for 7 this season, had a career best 103 Bristnet speed figure. Her, as you mentioned, she was beaten a nose in the Belmont Oaks to Fionn, but also beat Fionn in the Appellation at Keeneland earlier this year. And then as far as Lucara, Mark Cassidy did say that she was hurt by missing the Coaching Club American Oaks when she had to be quarantined due to the issues going on in the barn. And then we also had Brad Cox come out and say that Margie's Intention and Good Cheer, who were 3rd and 2nd respectively, they were compromised by the slow pace. So, I mean, you can factor that in, but it does feel like Nitrogen is starting to separate herself, and the versatility makes her even more, I would say, noteworthy and award worthy at the end of the year. But of course, we still have a little bit more left to go. It is August, so a couple more races to answer some questions to close out the year. Let's move over to She Feels Pretty, who is now going to be aiming toward the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf at a 1 3/8. Vance, do you feel like stretching out to a 1 3/8 is going to work out well for She Feels Pretty, who won this past weekend on the King's Plate undercard in the EP Taylor?
I'm a bit suspect about her chances stretching out. If Diamond Rain, the Godolphin horse, gets a better break, kind of kicks in a little bit sooner, she wins the EP Taylor on Saturday over She Feels Pretty. That race was at 1.25 miles. I just don't think stretching out to 1 3/8 is necessarily going to play to She Feels Pretty's strengths, especially. I mean, when you consider it, Diamond Rain was not a top level group performer in Europe before coming over to the EP Taylor, and there's going to be a lot better, classier fillies than that one going to come over for the Breeders' Cup. So now, with that said, She Feels Pretty is undoubtedly the top leading contender for champion turf mare honors, no matter what happens in the Breeders' Cup. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and if the goal is for She Feels Pretty to win the champion turf mare honors, I don't necessarily think running in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf at 1 3/8 is, completely necessary. She could always cut back to a mile, run in races like the First Lady at Keeneland and the Matriarch at Del Mar. If she continues her winning ways at a distance that might be better for her, no performance in the Breeders' Cup is going to trump the record that she's compiled domestically so far this year. So, but with all that said, I know the owners and trainer Cherie DeVoe are very much want to win the Breeders' Cup with her, want to showcase her on the big stage, and that's fine. They're going to take their shot at it, but to me, I don't think it's necessarily the best path forward for her for the rest of the year.
James, what is your counter argument there?
Well, I mean, she's 2 for 2 at 10 furlongs, winning a pair of Grade 1 races, and she won at 1 3/16 earlier this summer. So The thing with She Feels Pretty is, I mean, I don't think, I think she should absolutely aim for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. We saw Moira won that race last year. The North America based runners won two of the three big turf races. And I don't think the European contingent is going to be that deep either. I mean, we'll see who goes to the Filly and Mare Turf, but I'm not too worried about their milers. Obviously, the turf's a different ball game, and Rebels Romance is sitting out there, and Godolphin's got others for that. But to me, She Feels Pretty absolutely on par with the horse like Moira last year. I think that that race on Saturday wasn't her best effort. I think she was in this same pattern last year where she was banging around a little bit in the summer and running at a high class level, but she wasn't turning in her best efforts. And she ran she ran a close third in the Grade 1 Belmont Oaks. She ran a close second in the Grade 2 Lake Placid. And Cherie DeVoe freshened her up for the fall, and she ran her best race in the fall last year. Anybody who was doubting her in the Queen Elizabeth II off of these efforts during the summer campaign was sadly mistaken. She ran lights out in both the Queen Elizabeth II and the American Oaks at Santa Anita. And one thing about She Feels Pretty, she's got 8 wins. 6 of them have come over other courses. If anybody's worried about her transferring her form to Del Mar, they shouldn't be. And there was a little bit of a stir that her goat couldn't make the trip to Canada last weekend, and some people thought she was vulnerable, and maybe she would have been if the Godolphin filly had broken better. But I still think that she could be sitting on her biggest efforts this fall, and if she shows up with her best at Del Mar, to me, she's going to have a chance to strike the front and upper stretch, and we'll see if she can get to the wire.
She didn't have the cleanest trip on Saturday, as you mentioned, and John Velasquez said that somebody had hit her from behind and she was getting anxious, and he could feel it when she was switching her leads back and forth and actually cut through her bandages. So, it wasn't the cleanest trip, and obviously it was very close at the end. Diamond Rain, I thought, looked a little green at times, but does make you wonder going forward if that could be a horse that is a serious challenger in the Breeders' Cup if Diamond Rain were to make it there. But I do wonder what the competition's going to look like in that filly and mare turf. I know right now, looking at some of the probables, there's a couple from Aidan O'Brien's barn. And Vance, you would know much better than me how serious of a contender those 2 horses would be that have been mentioned, particularly targeting that race. But I feel like Aidan O'Brien obviously is one to have to take down in that race, and Cherie DeVoe would be looking for her first win in that race. So as far as stretching out and handling the distance, I feel like she can handle the distance, but I do wonder with the overseas contingent how well she stacks up in that race, and especially because it would be a 3-turn race. Is that correct? At Del Mar.
Correct.
And I know Chad Brown had things to say about the 3 turns in the past, and even mentioned She Feels Pretty for Cherie's barn, saying that he didn't think that She Feels Pretty necessarily wanted to go 3 turns.
Yeah, they could have run that race at a mile and an eighth too. So that was a big because they've run it at a mile and an eighth before. But I mean, Chad Brown has excellent truth, who won the Grade 1 Diana, and I do think she's sort of in between distances. So it's more of a factor, I believe, for her that She Feels Pretty, who has these wins at 10 furlongs to her credit.
Well, let's move on to our final points. What else caught our eye from the weekend? James, I'll start with you. And I know you always have 2-year-olds to watch
Yeah,
out for.
2-year-old
So,
maiden watch. I mean, let's
yeah.
start with the big runaway winner at Saratoga. It's Our Time. He's a dark bay colt by not this time. He's having a sensational summer with his offspring, and we'll see him here. There was a big favorite in here for Whit Beckman, Hero Declared, and he was odds on, and It's Our Time just blew, was just too fast for him. He tracked him in second, collared him on the far turn, and drew off to a brilliant 17.5 length victory. This performance earned a 100 Brisnet speed rating. He's out of a mare by Summerfront, but Seeking the Gold is in that female family, and some other Empire Makers, his second maternal dam. So at least for like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile at 2 turns, I don't think it'll be any problem for this colt moving forward. Very exciting prospect. Go with some of these brilliant 2-year-olds we've seen from Bob Baffert this summer, and Ewing as well at Saratoga. The second one I'll mention is a Baffert, but I've been focusing mostly on colts in this 2-year-old maiden watch, but I wanted to bring up a filly, Explora. She debuted for Bob Baffert, $350,000 2-year-old purchase on Sunday. And I mean, won in an absolute hand ride at 1-5 by about 4 lengths. Got a 98 brisnet speed rating, and had been working 6 furlong bullet works in preparation. And she is by blame out of a Bernardini mare, instantly like a prospect for next year's Kentucky Oaks with her stamina filled bloodlines. And she was pretty exciting at 5.5 furlongs on Sunday, Explora.
And it's our time had a 100 brisnet speed figure. I haven't seen the 2-year-old report, but is that the best 2-year-old speed figure from the weekend? Or
Oh
maybe
yeah,
so
yeah.
far?
Those were the two fastest.
Okay.
198 for It's Our Time and Explora.
Vance, what caught your eye?
I want to give a shout out to Future Is Now, the turf sprinting mare who on Friday at Saratoga won the Smart and Fancy Stakes for the second consecutive year. Maryland bred mare owned by the family of the late R. Larry Johnson, who sadly passed away earlier this year. Future Is Now has just become a gem of consistency over the last couple of years. She's won 7 of her last 9 starts, and her 2 losses were only by a half length each. So, I mean, you don't see too many specialists like this as consistent as this, winning consistently like this year and race in and race out. And she's just been a marvelous filly the last couple of seasons. Well spotted, very talented. I assume we'll see her again in the Franklin Stakes at Keeneland in October. That's a race that she won last year. I don't know what her plans beyond that will be. Maybe they'll take a stab at the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. It's at 5 furlongs, which might be a little short for her. I'm not quite positive about that. But regardless, this is a really neat filly, and it's great to see her win consistently over the last couple of years.
And I'll close out talking about the big weekend ahead when we had the card come out for Traverse Day. Obviously, some horse players were disappointed by the field size and the apparent competition in the 156th running of the Traverse. You're going to get reigning Kentucky Derby, Belmont, and Jim Dandy winner Sovereignty as the 2-5 favorite. And then Magnitude at 2-1, who's coming off a wire-to-wire win in the Iowa Derby. 2-back wired the field in the Risen Star before he was sidelined for a while with injury. Outside of that, you can see the field right here. We've got Haskell 4th place finisher, Bracket Buster, recent Curlin Stakes victor, Strategic Focus for Chad Brown, and West Virginia Derby runner-up McAfee. The 5-horse field is the smallest since 1994 when Holy Bull won, and the wagering opportunities are not the most exciting, especially if you're one to play. Well, certainly if you're trying to play any sort of win bet, but even the exotics aren't necessarily appealing here. But I will say Bill Mott is still searching for his first Traverse win, and this probably is his best chance he's ever had. But for those who are a little bit jaded by this field, the undercard for the 14 race program is much more exciting. We have 4 grade ones. We have the Personal Ensign and Breeders' Cup winning your in for the distaff, and we have 2024 Horse of the Year Torpedo Anna returning to the spa where she most recently placed a nose second to Fierceness in last year's Traverse, and she's looking to turn the tables on Raging Sea, who upset her in the La Troyenne on the Kentucky Derby undercard. The following race 10, will be the Grade 1 H. Allen Jerkins with 3 from Bob Baffert's barn, including Barnes, who's cutting back to 7 furlongs. You're going to also have Patch Adams in there, Chancellor McPatrick, Verifier, who's unbeaten from 3 starts for Brad Cox, and then you've got Smokin' Wicked, who ran away with the Amsterdam recently, plus Captain Cook making his first start since transferring to Todd Pletcher's barn. And then we also have a couple more win in your ends. The Grade 1 Ballerina is a win in your end for the Filly and Mare Sprint. The Grade 1 Forgo is a win in your end for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And then Bookham Dano is in that race looking to extend his win streak to 3, but that's a field of 11 you got in the Forgo. So a wide open race. Many of these races I've talked about, I think, are fairly wide open. So even though the Traverse may not be the most exciting outcome, I could be wrong, but I think the earlier stakes at least are going to produce some exciting results and You also see there in race 7, we have the grade 2 Lake Placid on the turf. So that's part of the stakes schedule for Saturday as well.
Big race for Peter Anna and the personal ensign because Kenny McPeak is still holding out a chance for her to go to the Breeders' Cup Classic this fall. She obviously has to win this race for that to still be on the plate. So that would be a big test. I thought the Jerkis Memorial just fantastic. Baffert has those runners, like you said, but Patch Adams and Verifier. I think both those colts are special for Cox. I'm glad to see them in against each other. And Milliken, Bookham, Dano. We'll see if Milliken can ever get the better of him, or if
Well, he won that race last year, right?
he won that race last year.
Mulliken won the Forego last year.
What? Yeah, he wanted that, but
Bookham Dano won the Jerkins, I believe.
Yeah, he was in the Jerkins. He ran third in there, but he's beat him 2 times in a row in their last 2 starts. So it's a good rubber match good third meeting between them. And 7 furlongs. They've been going at 6, 6.5, and now 7. So I like seeing the distances change as well.
Yeah, you brought up the 1994 Travers the last time there was a 5-horse field, and James will remember that one because Holy Bull had just barely hung on against Concern, the eventual Breeders' Cup Classic winner. So even though there's 5 horses in this race, if it turns out any half as good as that 1994 Travers, it'll be a great race to watch.
Well, we'll certainly be talking about the Travers and some of these stakes next week on the Roundtable. That's all the time we have for today. So we will see you next time.